What is going on, Hive Warriors? It's your boy Edward V, and today we're going to talk about an article that was just released by Women's Health talking about intermittent fasting, 10 negative side effects, and why it might not be right for you. I'm gonna literally go through those 10 different side effects point by point, and I'm going to give you my thoughts on them. If you've seen that article and it's giving you pause, you definitely want to stick around. I'm gonna go ahead and break it down in this video. Stay tuned. Okay, we're gonna quickly jump into it. So there are 10 side effects that the person who wrote this article in Women's Health is claiming can make intermittent fasting not work for you and not be the right fit for you. Now, nothing is for everyone. Yes, some things will work for someone and they won't work for others. And that is the case with intermittent fasting as well, because that's the case with everything. But one thing that I just absolutely detest is when people kind of float intermittent fasting into the same bracket as caloric restriction, but love to differentiate intermittent fasting from caloric restriction when it comes to side effects that actually have to do with caloric restriction and not intermittent fasting. Basically, what I mean by this is that they love to point at studies that are flawed, that look at intermittent fasting when you're allowed to eat, where they show that intermittent fasting with caloric restriction has no inherent benefit in terms of weight loss and all these things. They like to look at those studies, prop those studies up and say, well, intermittent fasting is just like caloric restriction, so what's the point of doing it? They're both equally positive when it comes to losing weight and health. But then when it comes to a negative aspect of intermittent fasting that's facilitated from caloric restriction, they like to say that, well, this shows that intermittent fasting will give you issues. And then they don't even mention caloric restriction when that's the catalyst for that specific issue. Now, if I sound cryptic, you'll know what I mean when I start diving into these 10 side effects. First side effect is feeling hangry, or feeling hungry and angry, and because you're hungry, you feel angry. So hangry. I actually touched on this subject like maybe 2 years ago on my channel, possibly 3 years ago, where I talk about why people can feel angry when doing intermittent fasting. And a lot of this is just the surface level of starting any new protocol that's going to be frustrating for you because your body isn't used to doing that. So if you don't do caloric restriction and then you start doing caloric restriction, you're going to have the same hangry feeling than you do when you go from eating all the time to not eating all the time. It's just uncomfortable for your body because it's not used to doing that. Your body wants to feel satiated, so when you're normally when you would eat until you were full or more than full, and now you're just eating till you're like halfway to that point, and your body doesn't like that because it doesn't feel satisfied. And there's certain things that trigger certain hormones. One in particular is neuropeptide Y, and this is a hormone that kind of tries to get you to eat more. It tries to get you to satisfy, to satiate your body. So if you're ignoring that hunger hormone, neuropeptide Y, you can become hangry. And it's been seen that people who have higher levels of neuropeptide Y can have a higher potential to feel hangry. But it's all individualized. It's all per that person's own mood swings or ability to go from 0 to 100, or to go from being happy to being mad. It's not a blanket thing where you're automatically gonna feel that way. For example, I used to feel very good when I was fasting, especially after I knew, like after my first week or second week, knowing that it was definitely working for me, and seeing the weight loss and seeing the body fat reduction and all of these different things happening, I felt good. I felt happy knowing that I was fasting, feeling that feeling of having an empty stomach. It felt very good for me. Now it's just the normal life for me. I don't really think of it like positively or negatively in terms of like a feeling that I'm like waiting to get hit with, because I'm used to doing this. But I remember vividly that I actually had positive feelings and had a positive outlook during my fasted times. So is it possible? Can you feel hangry? Yes, but can you also feel hangry from being at a caloric restriction? Yes. Now let's go ahead and move on to their second point in their article. Fatigue and brain fog. Now this one is really easy to debunk or kind of take apart. You are going to feel this way when you change something that you're doing to something else. That automatically is going to trigger certain things. Being at a caloric restriction can trigger brain fog and fatigue because you are consuming less energy. You are at a net negative energy balance, which means your body is giving up more energy to provide energy for you. So you're burning calories. But here's the cold hard truth. If you want to lose weight and if you want to burn body fat, you have to be at a caloric deficit. You have no choice. There's no other way around it. There's nothing you can wiggle your way out of and trick the system and be at a caloric surplus, but somehow burn all of your body fat and lose weight in a consistent manner. There's no way that you can do that. There has to be a caloric restriction. So if there has to be a caloric restriction, guess what? Brain fog and fatigue are those roadblocks that are going to just be annoying, but you have to accept them because there's nothing else that you can do. You have to be at a caloric restriction anyways. So this one is easily dismissed. This isn't exclusive to doing intermittent fasting. And newsflash, if you do intermittent fasting and you eat at a caloric surplus, you will probably not feel any of these feelings. Now moving on to number 3, food obsession. Now you're obsessed with food because you're not eating food. That's the logic. So since you're not eating it, you're obsessed with it because you constantly want it. Well, I mean, you can say that too if you restrict a certain diet. Like if you now are vegetarian, you might be obsessed with meat because you haven't been eating meat. If you start eating more healthy, you might be obsessed with McDonald's because you just haven't eaten McDonald's in a while. You take away something that you're used to and you're going to be thinking about how you felt when you were doing that other thing versus the thing that you're doing now. It's just part of the course, as well as fatigue and brain fog, things that are part of this element of losing weight or becoming healthier or trying to get to a healthier position in life. And of course, the argument when it comes to intermittent fasting is that because you're not eating for so long, you end up wanting to eat so much. But I find that to not be the case, and most studies show that people who do intermittent fasting actually end up eating less than those who don't do intermittent fasting when it's ad libitum, which means when they are told, hey, listen, you have no restriction. Eat as much as you want, eat as little as you want, whatever you want to do. Just make sure that you guys do 3 meals a day and split them throughout the day. And just make sure that you guys just eat all of your meals in a certain time eating window. Normally, the group that does intermittent fasting tends to consume less calories by default, simply because of the protocol itself. Now, can it create an eating disorder? If you're prone to an eating disorder, of course it can, because this is a major shift in eating. But so does dieting, so does overeating, like the complete opposite of intermittent fasting, eating 6 times a day, all the time eating. That can also create an eating disorder. So you just have to understand that there's pitfalls everywhere, but this doesn't give exclusivity to intermittent fasting. And this isn't an intermittent fasting thing that you should watch out for. If this happens, you should stop intermittent fasting. No, if you have an eating disorder, losing weight is going to be very difficult for you, because anything you do to shift yourself into losing weight is going to be a difficult kind of threading the needle situation for you, which can lead you to go back into some type of an eating disorder. The next one, number 4, low blood sugar. Now, some people's blood sugar actually improve with intermittent fasting, and many studies have shown that. That's one of the actual improvements or health benefits that come up a lot when they do blood testing diagnostics with intermittent fasting participants that are part of these studies and trials. However, not everyone is the same. So to give a blanket statement and say that blood sugar will go down because you do intermittent fasting, that is too specific and too on the nose for something that is supposed to be broad and supposed to be for women all over the world. I find it to be a little distasteful to even talk about something that is so poignant. So this point is completely dismissive. However, if you have possibility to have low blood sugar, if you are, for example, type 1 diabetic, this can affect you, yes, and intermittent fasting may not be for you because you need to have that constant energy intake, that constant glucose intake to be able to increase your blood sugar and make sure that it doesn't drop too low. But like I said, that is on an individual type basis. So this is by no means a smoking gun against intermittent fasting protocol. Another one is hair loss. And if you look at the breakdown of why they say hair loss is one of the reasons, is because nutrition, lack of nutrition can cause hair loss. Now this is where I'm talking about where they do that red herring thing, where they say that this is because of intermittent fasting, but in reality, there's a background reason for this. So now if you just go in there, look at the title of the article and just look at the bold titles of each individual point, you'll be like, oh my God, I could lose hair. This is not what I want to do. Oh my God, brain fog and fatigue. No. But if you actually read it, it says hair loss. And what they find is studies show that lack of nutrition causes hair loss. And intermittent fasting can facilitate lack of nutrition because you're not eating all the time, so you might not eat all of your nutritious meals for the day. If you do 16-8, I can guarantee you can easily get your nutritious meal for the day. You can get your nutritious meals for the day through eating 4 hours a day. It's very, very possible. You just have to be smart about it. And also, you can supplement if there's ever an issue. You could always supplement with things like vitamins. So, I mean, this is if you're at a caloric restriction and you're eating a low amount of calories, you might not get your nutrition for the day as well. It's not exclusive to intermittent fasting. When you're trying to lose weight, you are restricting. There are things you're taking away, so it makes it harder for you to get these things simply because you are on a path to losing weight. So this is what I'm talking about, where they love to say intermittent fasting and caloric restrictions are the same when it comes to positive elements, but love to try to push intermittent fasting in the forefront and say, well, this is why you shouldn't do intermittent fasting, even though the real underlying reasons for these issues are not specifically because of intermittent fasting. Intermittent fasting is just one of the protocols that you can use, but you can be led into this negative lack of nutrition situation with any diet out there. Number 6 is the same thing, loss in your menstrual cycle for women. This is caused by low calorie intake, and this is called amenorrhea. And I spoke about this in my video on the fitness industry is a lie, that video essays that you should check out actually if you haven't seen it. It's a really good video. But I spoke about this, and this comes not from intermittent fasting, but from a lack of caloric intake, a heavily reduced calorie intake such as 800 calories or 600 calories. If you're eating that low, and that is your average daily caloric intake. So by that I mean, for if you look at 1 week, throughout that 1 week, did your average daily caloric intake match up to about 800, 700 calories? If it did, that's incredibly low. Then your body will start to prioritize one thing over the other, things that it thinks it's immediately important versus things that aren't. And your menstrual cycle might be one of those things that it goes ahead and doesn't need to provide energy to that source because one, you're probably not using it right now, and what we need to make sure is that your liver and your heart and your kidneys are working fine. Not an intermittent fasting thing, not exclusive to intermittent fasting. And if you're doing intermittent fasting, please make sure that you're taking in the caloric needs for the day. If you're trying to be at a caloric deficit, that's fine, but you cannot be aggressively low. But the whole point is that this is another red herring tactic where they make you think that this issue is exclusive to intermittent fasting, but it is not. You can do intermittent fasting and still be at a caloric surplus. Another one where they do this is constipation, number 7. But what causes constipation? Is it because you're eating one meal a day and this triggers something biologically through your body? Your hormones excrete at a specific way, so now you're constipated and your stomach can't handle just that one meal? No. If you are not taking in enough fluids, you can do this. If you're intermittent fasting, you can be drinking water all day. You're taking in more than enough fluids. Are you eating fiber? Whenever you eat, if you're eating fiber, you're getting your fiber for the day. Intermittent fasting does not have anything to do with being constipated or not. Now, if you're doing intermittent fasting and you find yourself to be constipated, check your water intake. Please make sure that you're taking in a lot of water during the times when you're fasting. I do know that there's a lot of people that like to just do dry fasting. Do those if you want, but try to minimize them as much as you can, because it's much better to be hydrated. You could actually stave off things like headache and nausea if you're hydrated, rather than not being hydrated, just for that little additional benefit that you might get from a dry fast versus a water fast. But yeah, like I said, not exclusive to intermittent fasting, and you can actually still do all these things while intermittent fasting. Number 8, unhealthy diet. So they tap into the fact that psychologically, because you are eating just one meal a day, you're probably just going to eat an unhealthy diet. That is just making an assumption based on the criteria of a protocol, even though that doesn't hold merit with the protocol itself. The protocol doesn't represent eating unhealthy. The protocol is just simply fast and eat, fast and eat. And if you eat and unhealthy, that is something that you've decided, but that is not inherent to the intermittent fasting system. So once again, not connected to intermittent fasting and can be easily corrected if that's the case. You don't have to stop intermittent fasting. You just have to start eating healthy. And number 9, sleep disturbances. Now, this is the one where I'm thinking to myself, there is possible. And actually, I've done a video on 5 side effects, 5 real actual side effects that can connect to intermittent fasting. I've done a video on that. And one of the things that I talked about was making it hard for you to go to sleep or waking up in the middle of the night. And all of this stuff stems from hormonal reactions, cortisol increasing, things like the norepinephrine increasing. These are the fight or flight hormones that secrete simply because you are in a fasted state. So yes, this can happen, but you can also become used to feeling this way, and you can at one point start to be able to fall asleep in that state. So it happens to some people, not to all people, but if it does happen to you, you can rest assured that there is a flow and a rhythm that you can actually get comfortable with, and you'll probably be able to sleep comfortably in the near future if this is something that you're dealing with. Is it a make or break? Well, if it is for you and you're constantly waking up, you don't want that feeling and you much rather go back to eating normally, then it's up to you. Like I said, intermittent fasting is not for everyone, but there are so many benefits that come with intermittent fasting itself. And number 10, mood changes, which I don't understand why they took hangry and gave it its own thing, and then mood changes is something completely different. Now, they're talking about mood changes based on different things that can happen around your life because you're intermittent fasting. You might not be able to hang out with your friends, so this will make you nervous and anxious, and then your anxiety will go up. So it's detaching itself once again to the actual protocol, but then looking at these outside elements where you can't prove that it relates to every single person, and then making it definitive against intermittent fasting and saying why this is a negative side effect of intermittent fasting. I mean, it is up to you. You can be strategic with your time. You can be lenient with your timing, with the days that you fast. There's so much variety with intermittent fasting that you can choose to do it any way you like. It's very nimble. You could have any diet in the world that you want and still do intermittent fasting. You can do intermittent fasting Monday through Friday and not do it on Saturdays and Sundays. You can do the 16-8 protocol on Monday, but then the warrior diet, which is 20 hours of fasting, 4 hours of eating on Tuesday, and then do 1 meal a day on Wednesday, and then not do intermittent fasting. You can do so much when it comes to the intermittent fasting protocol, the full breadth of intermittent fasting. So just to pigeonhole an entire umbrella of intermittent fasting is just ridiculous. Some people enjoy doing intermittent fasting and can make it work around their lifestyle. So this is by no means something that puts a nail in the coffin to intermittent fasting. But if you haven't seen the article and how ridiculous it is, I will link it down if you want to take a look at it for yourself. Thank you for watching the video, guys. And of course, as always, I want to thank my patrons for my Patreon. I'm going to go ahead and put their names right up here. And of course, guys, as always, I'll see you on Sunday for another FAQ. Peace!